Okay, so last time we've talked about data source chaining and how we can connect two data sources so that they basically give one whole thing. And today we are gonna take a look at how to output JSON with Symphony, and also how to group our entries. And to demonstrate that, we'll be making this graph. At the moment it's just a canvas element in our transactions child page and a little bit of JavaScript that has months defined over here. Then we are just using these months as labels over here, as you can see, and then I'm just naming my data set, as you can see here, and I'm passing in the data for every month and also setting the color to red. So as you can see, third value is 780, and if you take a look at here, it's 780 as well. So that's basically all. I'm using chart.js library, which is a really nice charting JavaScript library, and let's begin. So first of all, let's go and create a new page. Oh, I'm already on the pages, silly me. So let me create a new page, and let's call this page report. And this is the page that will output our JSON so that we can display all this data nicely. And we will also set the type to JSON. And this will not automatically generate JSON for us. This is something that we have to do or use some extension for that. I'm of course going to show you the manual way of doing it. This JSON tag just tells Symphony to send the data with the JSON header files so that our browser and jQuery can interpret it properly. Instead we'll be sending it as a plain text, so that's not good. And we will not attach any data sources yet because we don't have anything. And let's create this page. Okay, so now let's go and create a data source for our report page, and we can just name our new data source report as well, like so. And now we want to filter our entries by date. Basically, I only want to show report from the beginning of the year to whatever date is today. So let's do this. First of all, we need to choose the proper source. I will take transactions because that's what I'm interested in, and I want to filter my transaction entries by date. So I'm just going to add this filter, and then I'm going to tell that I only want entries whose date is between the start of the year and today. So for that we can use what's it called? Let me just open a debugger, and on the parameters we want to use this year. Okay, so from this year, and we actually need to put a full date in here, and this year is just 2016. We need to have a date in this format. So we can just write outside of the curly braces 01, 01, and here I'm basically saying, you know, from the first day of the first month of the current year to what is it, today. So now I'm just getting all the transactions that has happened from the start of this year to today's date. Okay, then we want to sort all of our transactions by date, and we want them descending. Actually no, we want them ascending, because we want to have first the earliest entries. If we go back to the front end, so we want, you know, first this is the earliest date, and then we are going to the later date. So that's how we want to order our data source. And then we are coming to the grouping, so we can group by date, and you will see how the data source looks in the debugger. So the elements we want to include are just flowers. We are not really interested in the exact date. We just want everything will be grouped by the date already, so we just need the flower so that we can actually get the price for the flower. And we'll also use a data source chaining. So I'm just going to select ds-report.flower, which will output all the flower IDs from all the transactions that were filtered through by our data source. And then we want to attach this data source to the report page. So let's create a data source. And now we also want to get a data source that we have already created in a previous video called flower prices. We want to include this data source on our report page as well. So let's include this on our report page and transactions. So save changes. But this will not, work exactly as intended because we haven't done any data source chaining yet. We have done data source chaining with DS transactions, but we have not included DS report flowers. So we can just put a comma here, then curly braces, and not this, but let's say DS dash report flower. So we want to filter by this as well. And in this way we have actually reused our flower prices data source, because you don't need to create another flower prices report data source as well for this. So that's all we want. Let's save changes, and now we should have everything to start generating our JSON. So let's take a look at how our report page looks. It should currently be as you can see, we're seeing like HTML code, and this is because browser is expecting the JSON format to be passed, so he's not interpreting this HTML as you might expect. And this is because of that JSON tag that we have put on our page. So let's go into the debugger and see what data sources we have. As you can see, we have our report data source, and all the entries are grouped first by year, then by month, and we only have 1 year, so that's convenient. And then under each month we have entry, and we haven't included the exact date because we are only interested in the flower of this transaction, so that we can combine it with the price and then get the sum of all entry prices in a certain month. So essentially, let me just show you what kind of JSON we want to generate in the end. So it should be something like this. We want to get array of entries that have the month name and the total of sales for each month, so that we can simply insert all of that in here. Great, so I'll just close this and let's start working on generating our report. So I'm just going to open the front end as well so that we can follow changes, and let's open the report page. Now I'm not going to use the master theme here because we obviously don't need all of this in our JSON file, so you can just work directly in here. So let's clean up a little bit. As you can see, we are currently outputting doc type, this type of doc type, but we actually want just to output the plain text because we are generating JSON. So I'm just going to use this little command to output the text with UTF-8 encoding and just media type text plain. And here in the template I'm going to get rid of all of this, and let's make the start of our JSON. So every JSON file should start with object notation, and in here we can say something like, I don't know, let's call it report months. And in here we will create an array, and in this array we will have objects that contain the month name, so actually the month number in our case, because this is what Symphony is giving us, and it will also contain the total, like so, for example. And then we will have several entries, and let's just take a quick look at how this looks now. So if I refresh the page, we should get some JSON in here. Excellent. So now let's go and use XSL to generate all this JSON that we actually need. And we will actually have to use some trickery. So let's create a variable. We'll call it temp for temporary. And in here we will create a temporary XML, and this is because it will be much easier to sum everything, because at the moment our data source report and flower prices are separated. We need to first combine them into one and then do the summing. So let me do just that. Okay, so now this should work properly, and let me explain you what I did. So if you remember, we usually had only this in our XMLs, but in the report I've added a couple of things, namely these two, and you can think of it as importing some sort of library that extends a functionality of current XSL. So namely, I had to use the XSL node set function, and I'll explain why in a minute. So just so that you're aware how I'm able to use this, you first have to import this EXLS namespace, and in here you can see that I have created our root template. Then I'm applying a template to report/year, which is defined over here. And in here you can see that I'm creating a temporary variable, and inside of it I'm applying a new template. And this template will actually generate XML for every month. Let me just demonstrate this. Okay, sorry, I got a little bit distracted there. Anyway, yes, I want to demonstrate to you what we are actually getting from this template over here. Anyway, I've just quickly returned this regular output method so that we can actually see the tags. And yeah, as you can see, our template here is generating this XML. This is temporary XML, and we have node called month, and then we are just getting the value of the price of every transaction. And why we are doing this is because in our data source we have report, and then we have, grouped by month and year every transaction and a flower, but we don't have a price here. Price is in a completely different data source, and this makes things quite tricky to sum up. And because of that, I have just generated a temporary XML that just joins this price with the entry in a certain month, and then we are simply getting this output over here, on which we can call, as you can see over here, sum on every existing transaction with this XML. And that's basically all. So as you can see, I'm just using for every node set, we have to call this EXSL column node set on our temporary variable to actually convert this XML to a queryable XML document on which we can actually perform select and operations. Otherwise, this would be just a normal output. And this is also why we need to import this extension. And you know, after each month, I'm just checking if it's not last, then I'm just adding a comma here. If it is last item, then I'm not adding a comma, because otherwise we would have improper JSON. I'm going to undo all of these changes. There we go. So everything should work now. Fresh. And if you take a look at headers, so I'm going over to the network in the Chrome debugger, and I'm just going to refresh the page. And this is our request. So you will see under the content type, you can see that we are getting application/JSON with charset UTF-8. And now we just need to write some JavaScript that will fetch this JSON from our report URL and then put it into our graph. There we go. So I've written this JavaScript, and now as you can see, we are getting the proper sum for every month of our transactions. And at the moment we have 0 sales in September, October, November and December, because I'm recording this in August. And let's just take a quick look at JavaScript. As you can see, I'm getting a report, and I'm also adding a route. Now this route is not provided by Symphony. You have to create a JavaScript variable yourself. So in the pages, under the transactions XSL, I have just created, as you can see, a script before including my transaction.js, and in here I'm defining a new variable called route, and this I've just wrapped the value of the route URL in this single quotation marks, because this is actually a string, but we will not get it wrapped in the quotation marks, so you need to be careful about that. And then I have access to this root variable here, so I'm just adding /report on it, and I'm calling a report setup function once we get the data and from our report page, report API. So I'm getting this JSON inside of this data variable, and as you can see, I'm just doing some transformation on the data, setting everything, getting only the total field into our data field, and I'm passing all of this to the new chart, as you can see. And we can see in the console the final report, so I'm just going to go back and F12 console, and as you can see, I get an array of objects for every month. And also do note that you will not get months in which there is no transactions, and this is why I had to create a filler function that will just fill in the empty months so that we can display all of them in the graph. So this is how we do JSON APIs manually in Symphony, and I would actually recommend you that you install some JSON extension from the Symphony extensions page that will generate the API for you. I suggest that you take a look at the REST API, which is officially supported extension from the Symphonists, and as you can see, it supports XML, JSON, YAML, Serial, all these different formats. And you can also, I think, create API keys for your API, so that not everyone can actually use it. User has to be registered and stuff like that. So it's really cool if you're making a mobile phone application or something else. Then check it out. I will see you in the next video, where I'll show you how we can actually protect our pages and make them accessible only to the registered users.